Hi everyone, welcome to today's drawing. Today I'm going to be doing another master study. The subject of today's master study is this painting by Ingres. The painting is called The Princess of Broglie. I'll talk a little bit more about the artist and why I chose this painting in a bit, but for now I'm just starting off doing the drawing with the side of my pencil, following the process I usually use for these master studies. The time I have today is quite short for such a large portrait, so it's only 1 hour and 20 minutes that I've given myself. So before starting, I had a little think about what I wanted to achieve in my drawing today, and this is something that's good whenever you're doing a session. If you set out an intention at the beginning of what you want to focus on and what you want to achieve, I find that really helps result in a productive session. So today I knew I had a short amount of time. I really wanted to capture her posture, and I also wanted to dive deep into seeing how I could replicate some of the textures that I see in her dress and jewellery in a drawing. I love the way that her very smooth skin, her glowing skin, contrasts against her dress, which is glowing too, but is covered in little pleats, thick folds of fabric, and also the ribbons hanging down, and her pearls and her jewellery. So there's a lot going on there. A lot of very smooth, similar tones. So I was kind of curious or interested to see how I could really capture that in a way that made sense as a pencil drawing and was compelling. So that was really the focus of my drawing. So that meant I had to really prioritize my time. I didn't have a lot of time to measure out everything perfectly and focus on getting a good likeness. So in this initial sketch, I really wanted to just get everything roughly in the right place. And then my plan was to rely on an application to kind of check in on the drawing likeness rather than having to kind of focus on getting that correct myself. And I'll show you that in a little bit. So yes, it was quick sketch to start off with, just to get everything roughly in the right place without kind of holding myself to a high expectation of accuracy. So Ingres was a painter from the 1800s. He painted this in 1852. It was one of the last paintings that he did. His style is very distinctive, and you might have seen some of his paintings. Some of his nudes are very popular. He's got one of a lady in a Turkish bath where she's looking over her shoulder. I would definitely recommend checking it out. If it wasn't for YouTube's funniness about nudity, I would probably be drawing that painting right now. But for now, I do think this one's beautiful as well. So it's a fun one to tackle. So yeah, he had a very polished style. His ladies are beautiful, but they look more like statues than real people. And that's all around how he handles and simplifies the features on their faces and their bodies. So he's removing a lot of extraneous things about the person, like a lot of the way their, the veins, their wrinkles, the folds in their flesh, all of that is just kind of wiped away in the kind of 1800s airbrushing. He also makes the skin glow, and I'm not really sure how he does that. It's probably glazes of colour when he's oil painting. I'm not really sure. It's not something I've dived into, but it is nonetheless fascinating. And I think we can learn a lot by studying a master like this and seeing how he simplifies the human form. So back to my drawing. At this stage I was pretty happy that everything was roughly in the right place, so I did a bit of an overlay. I'll put a link above into how you can use overlay in your own artwork, but in this case I'm actually using the app Procreate on my iPad to overlay the pictures. It took me a little time to get everything lined up, but once I saw there was a few issues. So I'd got her arm slightly in the wrong place, and her shoulder wasn't positioned correctly. Now, I mean, obviously if a drawing's wrong, you can decide for yourself what you want to fix. Do you want to fix the face? Do you want to fix the body? That's very much up to you to decide, or even maybe you just want to leave things where they are because you like the way it looks, even though it's not 100% faithful. But in this case, yes, I decided I was going to fix their arms. I quite like the way I'd drawn her face. It was fairly accurate. So this is just me being 100% efficient to say, well, I can quickly fix the arms and then it will be roughly in about the right place. So here I am going in and fixing those elements that I saw were incorrect when I did the overlay. I'd kind of straightened her up a little bit. I think that's because the shoulder was in the wrong place, and that kind of threw everything else off in the pose. I mean, I always think it's quite interesting and funny how one thing being off can really escalate when you're doing kind of comparative measurements. So this is definitely a reminder for me why it is so important to measure, but like I say, not really a priority for me in this particular drawing. So I was mostly focused on other elements. So yeah, just fixing in, and it's really easy to fix errors at this early stage of the drawing, which is why I think this is a good time to do that, overlaying and checking in. So yeah, I decided to make sure that all of the clothing was in. I wanted to get the chair in, I wanted to get a bit of the background in, so there is a lot here, a lot to tackle. And I didn't, although I had an intent to try and capture those elements accurately, I didn't really have a plan for how I was going to manage that, just some kind of ideas. So again, this is very much like a sketchbooking session where I'm playing around with a few different things. I did have the idea of, when I was doing her flesh, to get that very smooth appearance, to mostly rely on smudging, so using my paper stub to kind of smudge around the corners and get that kind of turning by smudging rather than by using my pencil and hatching, because I really wanted to get that very smooth effect of her skin. A bit like when I did the morning after the celebration study, which I'll link above if you want to go and see. I took a very similar approach where I made the skin very light and smooth, and I made a lot of the surrounding elements kind of dark and hatchy. So definitely a similar approach that I was taking here, and you can see I'm spending quite a lot of time just kind of really smudging out the skin to get those kind of turns in convincingly. I would say that in terms of my process, I would definitely focused on one area at a time. So I felt like I wanted to get the face roughly right, so that once I was happy with the face, then I could really focus on the clothing and the jewellery. So that's kind of why maybe I brought the face up to a higher level of finish. Definitely didn't get the likeness spot on here. I think something about the eyes wasn't quite right. I did fix it a little bit, so you can skip to the end if you like and see how it turned out. But I did fix some elements of the likeness, but it's definitely still not quite right. But again, I really enjoyed getting into some of the fabrics and some of the textures I see around there. So a little close up on the face so you can see some of the things I'm doing. You can see I'm working in a very small scale. That makes getting the turns and the accuracy really, really tough. But I mean, the good thing about working in graphite is you can just keep working over it and keep developing those edges. You've really got to develop a very gentle, smooth touch, but once you have that accuracy in terms of the way you lay down graphite, then it's just a case of working up in layers and developing those turning forms. It's super tricky. If you're interested in kind of courses of study or ways to improve that, then I do really rate Stephen Bauman's atelier training, which goes into things like barg plates. Doing exercises like that can be really helpful to kind of develop that understanding and that ability to build and turn form using graphite, using pencil to develop those kind of graduations of tone. So it's definitely something that I'm constantly working towards. So I can see improvement. I do draw a lot and it is getting better, but I've still got so much to learn when it comes to some of these drawings. It was a bit interesting. You can see on the left hand side she's got this kind of gauzy veil hanging off of her hair bows. I was a little bit kind of torn about how to capture that because it kind of merges into the background. I think if I had a larger piece of paper and more time, it would have been interesting to build up the tone in graphite and then use my eraser to pick up some of those details. But with the size of this drawing, it just wasn't really possible, even with my tombow eraser. So I definitely had to make some decisions and use a bit of creative liberties when it came to capturing some of those, just like I'm doing here with her dress. And you can see I'm not really labouring it a lot. I'm definitely, there's a lot of scribbling going on. When it comes to fabric, I think the trick to learn with drawing fabric is a lot like drawing hair. It's not about identically replicating the folds and the fall of the fabric. It's about representing the essence of the way the fabric behaves, which sounds really obscure, but I think it's one of those things that you understand if you practice it a lot. Just like when you're drawing hair, I mean, you don't have to have every hair in the right place. What you do need to capture with is a sense of how rigid it is. So So how, you know, whether the hair falls quickly over the head, so if it's very sleek thin hair, or whether it's thick hair. Fabric's very much the same, so you need a feel for how rigid it is, how quickly it turns, how it folds, how it creases. And if you can kind of capture that roughly correctly, then it doesn't matter if the fold is like an inch to the left or an inch to the right. You need to get an essence of how that fabric behaves. And we can say it in this drawing here. So if you look at her ribbons, you can see they turn very quickly, and you can tell that by the highlight on the ribbon. It's a very sharp turn. That's because ribbons are very soft and floppy, so they kind of flap down. So if you can get that captured in your drawing, you can get a feel for the kind of softness of the ribbon. Then if you compare that to her dress, now the folds in her dress are very thick. It looks like it's very thick satin. You can see it's almost maybe got a layer of interlining there. So the fabric is very kind of thick, but there's some slight creases in the fabric that gives you a feel for how it behaves. And those things, when we look at them, our brain automatically says that's silk or that's satin. You know, we translate that immediately based on the reflections and based on the way it behaves. So if we can capture elements of that, then that's just a cue for your brain to go, that's silk, or oh, that's satin, or no, that fabric there is linen, or you know, you automatically know what you're looking at here. So I think if you can kind of capture those things somewhere, then that gives your brain, you know, your brain doesn't know exactly what this dress looked like, it just understands that that's a dress and this is roughly what fabric it's made of and this is how that fabric behaves. So I don't know if that made sense, but I think the only way to practice that is really just do a lot of studies. So you can do some draped fabric studies. You can even do master studies of draped fabric studies, because it's something that masters have done a lot throughout time because they know how important it is. Hair is an interesting one as well. You can do studies of people's hair that behaves in somewhat of a similar way, in the sense that you don't need to get the right chunk of hair in the right place. You just need to replicate how it turns, how it falls. Animal fur, exactly the same. So all of those things, definitely worth doing a kind of lots of practicing of if that's something you want to get right. So here I'm just flipping the drawing through 180 degrees. I do this a lot and I find it incredibly helpful to make me realise, you know, what I need to fix, not just in the drawing accuracy, but in the way, you know, in the way the tones work, how everything works in relation to each other. So this is a really great reset for the brain to help you realise what needs to get fixed. So you can see I'm going back and fixing some of the things in the face now that I'm seeing, which I didn't see before. I'm also adding in some of the background colour. I wasn't really sure what to do with this, but I really wanted her skin tone to kind of sing. So for that I needed to get some dark tone in the background to provide that level of contrast. Now I definitely think I could have gone darker with a background, but again it's a bit of a time thing. So it's figuring out and prioritising what you have time to do and what you don't have time to do. I mean, if time isn't an issue, then that's great, because it doesn't matter if you kind of spill over a little bit. But I think often with these master studies, I'm very busy, so I really have to kind of limit myself to a certain set amount of time and just do what I can in that time, which is really great practice as well. I think it's one of the reasons that life drawing is so helpful. So yeah, I'm just kind of working on those tones and bringing everything in so that it all makes sense in relation to itself. So now I'm flipping it back upright, and this is really the time for like the last tweaks. I'm doing again some last tiny little fixes on the face, and then I'm just having a look at the drawing and figuring out what it really needs in the time I have left to just make it complete. I think at this stage I had about 10 or 15 minutes left, so it was a fairly short amount of time. So I really kind of had to figure out and prioritise. I wanted to fix her face, but then I also want those last finishing touches that are kind of my signature style, I guess. And a lot of those are around these kind of very thick contour lines that I'm adding in now. There's a lot of kind of similar tones and a lot of texture going on. So I think sometimes when you don't have colour to play off of, you just need these kind of darker contour lines or emphasis lines so that you can really cue the person looking into what they're looking at. So that's something I've just kind of developed over time and I found quite helpful. It's probably a little bit of a cheat because I don't have a lot of time to kind of refine the tones nicely. So I'm kind of cheating by adding some darker lines, but it generally seems to work. And this is the finished drawing. You can see when you get close up it's very rough. There's a lot of random scribbling, there's a lot of hatching. This definitely reminds me a lot of my drawing that I did of the day after the celebration. But overall I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I like how it looks quite smooth and refined from a distance, but when you get in close it really does have all those rough textures, and that's something that I guess I'm playing with a lot, so it's something I really like. So I hope you found this demo interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any ideas for future videos. Ideas are always welcome. And thanks very much for watching. Bye.